Felicia. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, where are you calling in from? I assume Alaska, or did you move?
I live in San Francisco now.
Awesome. So, when did you make that move? I assume when you left the national park?
Yeah, I moved here permanently in September of 2023, I think.
Okay. Cool. Very nice. Yeah. So thanks for coming on. Ultimately, I wanted to talk to you about all things in conservation and the outdoors. And obviously, you've had really great experience being that you were a national parks ranger. And now explain to me what the new role that you're doing is.
I do science communication now for a nonprofit and science institution here in San Francisco. So kind of similar to like my National Park Service background, I was like a media ranger for Katmai National Park, so that kind of skill set directly translated into what I'm doing now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about what you did while you were a park ranger, how you got into it specifically.
It's definitely not a straight shot path. I kind of did everything under the sun, I think, as a ranger. You wear a lot of hats. I think I started my career with the National Park Service in 2021.
Wow.
Before that, I actually was in the Peace Corps. I was in the Philippines as a coastal resource management volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
And then due to the pandemic, we got evacuated and I kind of had to do a career shift.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you started in the Philippines. Did you have any background in schooling, or was this something that you did right out of high school and you're like, I'm just gonna go and experience what the Peace Corps has to offer and gain my experience there?
I graduated in 2019 with a Bachelor of Science in Ecology from the University of North Texas. And so immediately after that, I went to the Philippines. And that was kind of I think there's only one kind of role like that in Peace Corps, because I think when a lot of people think Peace Corps, they think they're teaching English abroad or something.
Okay.
But I ended up working directly with the Philippine government, and I worked in this town called Miak, and I was helping them with the management of their coastal resources.
Okay. That's so cool. So when you graduated, you knew that you were going to go into the Peace Corps, or was that something that you did on a whim?
I actually didn't know that something like that existed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out about it through just different career job fairs. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be a cool way for me to get some hands-on research and just work within coastal resource management, which is what I thought I wanted to do. And then the pandemic happened and I got evacuated from site. I ended up moving back home with my parents for a little bit. And then that's when I got into my career as a park ranger.
Okay, cool. Okay, so going from the Philippines and Texas, which are typically very warm regions, and then going to Alaska, was there a choice in where you got to go, or was it that you applied to the National Park Service and they sent you wherever?
Yeah, you do get to pick whenever you're a park ranger. It's just like applying for any other job.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to apply through USA.gov, and that is the federal federal job application site. I had to make a federal resume and everything. It was 5 pages or something like that. And I got my first job actually here in California at Muir Woods National Monument. And then once you get your first Park Service job, it's a lot easier to get other seasonal jobs later down the line, because seasonal jobs have a rehire status that you can do, and so you can move to another park so long as it's the same kind of job.
Gotcha. Okay, so as long as there's an opening wherever you're looking to go, then they're willing to hire you. That's really cool. I had no idea. So with this background that you have with your college degree and then going to the Peace Corps, was this seasonal work something that you really had on the radar for what you thought you were going to be doing? Or did you think you would be more in a 9-to-5-esque job?
I definitely did not think I would take the career path that I have now. I actually thought that one day I was going to be a scientist in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up getting, the Peace Corps job and doing a lot of field work in marine biology kind of field. And then I applied for a park service role, and then that just turned out to be kind of inherently seasonal. Most jobs within the park service are.
Hmm.
And I like that in the like beginning because you got to like move place to place and try all these like really cool parks in these really remote areas, and each job is very different despite the title all being the same.
Hmm.
So like every 6 months for like 4 years I was packing up and moving to a different place.
Wow. So that has to be exhausting.
Yeah, it got really exhausting. The lifestyle can be pretty hard. Like it can be one of the things that I think is hard that a lot of people don't talk about is just like the impact it has on your relationships. Like
Yeah.
I'm always moving around from like family and my friends, and then if you're dating somebody, that can be
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah, especially when you get into the realm of seasonal work. So, a little blurb about me, I actually did my first seasonal gig at a dude ranch in Colorado and I met my boyfriend there. But that's a very like dating heavy group of I don't know if it's similar in the National Park Service. I have to imagine that it is, that you all have similar interests, that you all live in a similar area, that you all start dating each other, and then when you move, then you kind of what happens next, right?
Yeah, it for sure is like that in the park service, like any seasonal kind of job. Like, I actually went into that career. I was like dating my long term boyfriend. We're actually engaged now, yay.
Congrats!
But that was a challenge with that lifestyle for sure.
Yeah. That must be so tough, even with just moving around in general, because I'm pretty nomadic as well. And while I was living on the ranch, I realized that I didn't talk to anybody for like a year. And that was because you're in a super desolate part of town. I can't imagine Alaska had too great of cell service or too great of Wi-Fi connectivity. So what was that like?
Well, the first year that I was out in Alaska, it was really remote.
Mm-hmm.
All of us kind of lived together in Brooks Camp, which is like a 1 square mile like developed area in, the huge like massive national park. All the rangers live there, and there were two phones for the for the whole thing. They were 1 mile apart from each other on opposite ends of that square mile. So there
Wow.
are like 30 of us in 1 mile. We have to sign up for the phone.
Well, at least you have to be organized and you got to plan ahead. I mean, you can tell someone when you're going to call them at least.
Yeah, and internet is just like agonizingly slow. It takes
Yeah.
forever even to load one email.
Perfect. Good. Great. So, really, did you end up doing a lot of snail mail? Like, how did that work with your boyfriend at the time, now current fiance?
We did actually. We did a lot of snail mail. That was really fun. And there's like postcards in the gift shop too. So I would send those to like friends and family and stuff
Yeah.
everywhere.
That's awesome. Okay, so with all of your experience in the National Park Service and what you did in the Peace Corps and what you're doing now, how do you feel about all of the recent things or recent events that have been happening in terms of like the cuts to the National Park Service and National Forest Services and now the big beautiful bill that's coming up? Like those are really impactful to not only the National Park Service but just community and public land and what that really means.
Yeah, there's a lot in this like big. Am I allowed to cuss? In this big shitty bill. In this big shitty bill, there's a lot wrapped
Yeah.
up into it, but there's a lot that impacts public lands specifically. I think I have a lot more leeway when it comes to people who have the experience working in the government because I don't work for the government anymore, so I can say whatever I want.
Yes.
Government employees are not allowed to speak out, really. They have to remain neutral, especially if you're like a visitor at work and you ask a Park Service ranger about this topic. They're going to have to
Right.
give you some like mandated neutral statement.
Oh.
So I've kind of taken it upon myself to be a little bit more of an advocate or a lot more of an advocate for the fight for public lands. There's a lot in this bill. There's a lot that is happening also outside of the bill, just with the new Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum,
Mm-hmm.
all of these mandates for the National Park Service. But when it comes to what the main concern is with this bill is there is a massive targeting of public lands that are potentially up for sale. They are targeting not the national parks, which people are tend like that's what they tend to think of first. But what's at risk right now are BLM lands, which is the Bureau of Land Management, and National Forest, which is managed by the Forest Service. There are over 300 million acres of this land that is at risk of being sold, and they can sell in this bill a minimum of at least 3.3 million acres. This can be done without any public oversight, any public comment, any other vote besides what's going to happen to this vote in the Senate right now. So, the crazy thing is, this was actually introduced earlier in this bill when it was going through the House of Representatives. But because of such a large public outcry, that got removed. But then, when the bill moved on to the Senate, which is where it's at right now, this was put back in, and now it's even worse. There are even more lands up for sale.
And I remember growing up, I grew up on the East Coast and I had no idea what public land was. I moved from Boston to San Diego and my dad and I did a road trip. And as we were driving across the country, we were in his Sprinter van that he converted into like basically a 1 bedroom apartment, that sort of thing. And so we just camped in the Sprinter van and he was like, we're going to just stay at this BLM. I was like, what is that? He's like, Bureau of Land Management. I was like, I don't know what that is. And so I feel like there's a good part of this country, a good portion of this country or people that don't really even know what public land is and what that means to so many people. So could you elaborate on what that public land really serves as?
Well, public land is land that belongs to every single American. You already have a piece of it. You don't have to pay to access it. It's there. Most of the land is managed either by the Bureau of Land Management or the Forest Service. So that includes like national forests. That includes like recreation areas. If you like are driving on a road in the West and you see this sign and it says like managed by the Bureau of Land Management or like XYZ National Forest, that is public land. You own it as an American citizen. And a lot of that land, people access it for hiking, for camping, hunting. Anglers do it for fishing. And it's just these large swaths of land that are open to the public. And there's so much of it. And the thing with this bill is if it's sold, it's going to be sold to private industry. And that private industry can do whatever they want with that land. It's no longer yours. You can't go camping. You can't go hunting. It could, be drilled or mined or logged, and it's not accessible to the public anymore.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you would have to pay an admissions fee to even be able to access what they have going on, whether it's a ski resort, whether it's a hiking operation or hunting operation, you would have to pay to access the lands that are currently free.
Yes, correct. Or you might just not be allowed to access it at all if the landowners decide not to open it up.
Right, that's also true, which is a horrifying idea, being that there's so much preservation and there's so much activity and things that you can do in these lands that are just free. And it doesn't cost you anything. You're able to go and visit them. You can camp at them. And like you said, you can hunt at them so you can feed yourselves. And this is huge for populations out west when there's so much that is an expense in the West now, where you see the rise of all of these ski towns and these ski villages that are seemingly pushing people out of affordable living and pushing people out of area where they can afford groceries. And so hunting allows for people to be able to afford food and be able to actually bring home meat that they can eat that isn't a fortune and doesn't disrupt their bank account. It's hugely impactful for that reason alone.
Yeah, especially hunting and especially anglers. Like when I was living in Alaska, all of my groceries had to be flown in.
Right.
They took weeks to get there. They were very, very expensive. And so one of the ways that I was able to get protein was just by going to the stream that is like a mile from my cabin and going fishing. And so long as I had a valid fishing license, I could go in and catch, the limit of fish every day.
Right. Yeah. And the majority of the land that's at stake is in Alaska. And I have been on the side of TikTok or Instagram or whatever that shows you what the prices of grocery stores are in Alaska. So for example, grapes are $12 for a bag And something as simple as like a cereal is $15, and it's absolutely egregious. And I have no idea how you would even begin to afford that if you couldn't hunt or fish.
Oh yeah, I've seen a Tostino's like frozen pizza that's like $5, like in the lower 48 for like $55.
Oh my gosh, a luxury item. That's horrifying. And the thing is that doesn't even need to be preserved. Like you can bury that pizza and dig it up in 10 years and it would still look the same. That's horrible. Like why are they doing that? Because they can.
Yeah, it's private greed, like first and foremost. Like, then that's the sad thing about this is if you don't understand like how big of an impact this public land is that you already own. If it is sold, it's never going to be given back. You'll never get that land back. And it would be sold to, you know, like oil companies that are going to go and drill that land that you already own and then sell it back to you.
Right. Yeah. And the other part of that is why? Why is this something that we need? Why is this something that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer? And the thing that feels so helpless to me is this isn't an actionable bill that you and I can go and vote on. This is something that is higher than both of us, that deems the importance of your elected officials, of who you vote into the House, who you vote into the Senate matters, because these people are choosing whether we keep this land or not.
And yeah, that's the scary thing is this can be done without any public oversight, any public vote. And that's also, you know, how you have to fight it is since we can't vote on it, you have to go out and really bother your representatives. Right now it's going to the Senate. So you need to have your like senator on speed dial and just flood their voice box and their inbox with messages to like vote no on this bill.
And do you see that has a positive effect, that getting these phone calls and streaming these phone calls, do you think that does something, or do you think that like could potentially backfire and be like, well, everyone's annoying me, I'm just gonna ignore everyone and do whatever I want to do?
Definitely think it does something, because when people went out and called their representative, that's what got that removed from the bill in the first place. It's sad that it's back up again, but that means we could do it again. And it's not the only way to combat this bill too, but it definitely shows that there is like a large interest in the public against selling this land.
Right, exactly. And so with this bill and with the recent cuts to the National Park Service, how does that also compare to trying to conserve the land in general in terms of the National Park Service limiting entry for specific parks to try and preserve that land? Do you feel like there's some sort of like juxtaposition there of, well, the parks are only as accessible as we can make them while trying to preserve them, but also we're trying to also preserve the land? Because all of the verbiage when you read about the big shitty bill is that we're preserving land, that we're trying to do that, like all of that jargon of saying, well, we're trying to preserve it. But that's not the case.
I mean, first off, by that land being public land, that land is already preserved depending on the agency that owns it. Each agency has its own mission on how they plan on using the land. The National Park Service is more about conservation, so that land is a lot more untouchable. But if it is owned by the federal government, that means it's owned by the American people. And so the people get to dictate how that land is used.
Okay, so basically, with us having our own land, we can do what we please with it in terms of safety and also just being good stewards to the land that we've been given. So that's hugely impactful. But what else is there to take into consideration with the big shitty bill? Is there anything else that you feel like needs to be highlighted, or are there any other opinions or ideas that you have that you'd like to share on it?
I mean, there's a lot of bad that's rolled into this just like massive bill of evil, and they all compound on one another. Included in this bill, besides selling off massive swaths of public land, they're, you know, cutting funding and all kinds of things to like National Science Foundation and you know, regulations for the EPA, and things like AI is going to not be regulated, which also is going to have a huge environmental impact.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that is rolled into this bill that effectively is just one big bill to strip the wealth of, the lower 99% and transfer it to the top 1%.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And when I think of like bills getting passed and bills being vetoed, I don't understand how something can be vetoed and then come back. Like you're saying that there's things that were in this bill that they've made some amendments to and now they're trying to repass it. Is that essentially just them making amendments and then trying to pass it off as a different bill, or is this something that we've seen before?
I'm sure it's something that we've been seen before, but at least in this case, with the public land sell-off, it was removed after it passed through the House, but then it goes into the Senate. So the senators can make changes can make changes and amendments to that bill. The senator that they're pointing the big finger at to adding this is Senator Mike Lee of Utah. So especially if you are a constituent or you live in Utah, you need to be on the phone with your senator. And it is working because apparently he released a tweet last night saying that it's something that we're working on. So it shouldn't be something that we're working on. It should be something that we're removing.
Right. And that's what I've been seeing in the recent news is that there's being some adjustments that are being made and there's some debate and discourse that's going on about what's written. Whereas it seems, in my opinion, that everything that's in the bill doesn't benefit the people as a whole and doesn't represent the best interests as that lower 99 that you were just referring to.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. And I think that is kind of the point of this administration too, is it's a tactic to have all of this flooding all at one time so that you're so disorganized and trying to fight on all of these different fronts and you just don't know which way to attack. But at least for me, I feel like I have expertise in the fight for public lands, so that's something that I'm focusing on. And I mean, that could be a strategy that you take in your regular everyday life is show up for the other things that you care about that are in this bill. But if you have particular expertise on something, organize around that facet. And so then there will be all of these different movements that can put a concentrated effort towards something.
Right, exactly. So ultimately, what is something that if this bill does pass, it's going to immediately affect right away?
Well, depending on, what minimum 3.3 million acres of land is sold, I mean, you're going to see that gone and not come back.
Right.
So if you have a particular, piece of land or place that you love recreating in or accessing in that 300 million acres, it could be gone.
Right, yeah. And then on the opposite side of that, say it doesn't get passed and we're free of the terrible bill, what happens then? Is that something that we have to continue campaigning for? Is that something that we can just stop worrying about because it didn't pass this time? What do you recommend then?
I think we need to number one, keep an eye on it because it came back, right?
Right.
So it could potentially come back again. And just keep an eye out stay informed on this issue and especially get involved with the areas that are near you. If you, live near either a national park or a national recreation area or a national forest, those places often have friends groups, conservation groups that, you can go in and get involved with and volunteer with and take care of the place that you care about that maybe you didn't know was in your backyard, but because of this horrible bill that, put this on your radar, now you know. And then also just go forth and be a good steward of the land that's there. Leave no trace is going to be especially important in this season. And, with a combination of this bill and then all of the cuts coming to land management agencies like the National Park Service, like the Bureau of Land Management, manpower across taking care of those public lands is going to be a lot more diminished. There's going to be a lot less manpower. So being a good steward of the land when you go out to recreate is going to be really, really important. Practice leave no trace. If you are planning on going out, I'm going on a backpacking trip in a couple of days. And so some of the things that I do is I bring a garbage bag with me and pick up the trash on the trail. There might not be rangers that are available to patrol. So, helping in the little ways that you can will still make an impact.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a huge, huge thing that can go a really long way really quickly, especially with the recent cuts to the National Park Services. And that's also something that I would like to touch on is ultimately what the National Park Service, like obviously you said that you can't take any sort of political stance to or from the big beautiful bill or any political stances whatsoever. So are you still able to advocate and campaign ultimately for the protection of free land, or is that something that's completely off limits?
Well, I can because I don't work for the government, so I'm going to now, especially because I have that expertise and like I was a ranger for 4 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, even during like good, I'm putting air quotes, good years, I never worked at a park that wasn't understaffed already. So the fact that the National Park Service is facing these cuts now is just extremely devastating. And with that combination of understaffing the parks and potentially slashing the budget of an already strapped agency, they are mandating that all parks have to be open. You can't close campgrounds. I think, at least for me, it seems like a strategy of like cut funding to the services, diminish the services as much as possible. And so then when people say, my visit to the national parks was horrible, like the National Park Service is doing a bad job, when legislation gets introduced like this big beautiful bill that wants to sell it off, that's just another case where somebody can say, oh, well, they weren't even doing a good job anyways, might as well sell it to a private corporation that will do a better job.
That's a wild concept. I don't think I've ever been to a national park and been like, National Park Service is doing a terrible job. That's the same type of people that get on Yelp and complain about the views not being good or them not seeing bears while they were at the national park. Like, what do you want me to do? It's a park.
I mean, like, as when I was a ranger, there were definitely people that had that opinion and voiced that opinion to me.
About which was not seeing wildlife, or that the National Park Service was doing a poor job of upkeeping the land?
Both.
That's wild. So what did they say? And and are you allowed to respond to that, or is that considered politically charged?
I wasn't really there's a diplomatic way that you could respond to it in like a neutral way. But like especially I think we're seeing with this administration too, one of the tactics that they've been using to, justify firing federal employees across, all sectors, not just the National Park Service. Is categorizing them as like unelected bureaucrats that, are lazy and they don't care about their job. They're only here to collect a check, which I think is farther from the truth.
Right. Because if you take a look at some of the paychecks that you're getting, it's not really matching the paycheck that you could get elsewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, people turn down lucrative private sector jobs for, a job because they want to wear the flat hat. They want to be a park ranger. And, I've had to do crazy things in my line of work, even, risking my own life to protect the lives of visitors. And that, is not reflected in the GS5, which is like the lowest level pay on the like federal pay scale.
Yeah, that is crazy. So you're out there trying to protect the land, you're trying to conserve this beautiful space, you're protecting people, and then you don't see that reflected in your pay. And then additionally, you feel like an invaluable asset to the government because they're just like, you know what? We don't need you. The land will take care of itself. What? In what way?
I mean, the fact that even, like, it wasn't just National Park Service employees that were fired.
Right.
If you work for the government, you're not getting paid very well, but there's just this, like, notion that for some reason they're all there to collect a check. And, like, the size of my check is not very big. I don't have to be, escorting visitors between bears, like putting myself between a bear and a group of tourists for that fat government paycheck.
Yeah.
That's not happening. And there's just, different facets that the Secretary of Interior is mandating that National Park Service employees do to keep their jobs, like having to write 5 things you accomplished this week in an email. Now they're, mandating that signs in the National Park Service, if I don't know the exact verbiage that they used, but if like an informational sign is representing American history in a way that speaks negatively about American figures or American history, right now visitors can report that and say that, this particular figure or this part of history is being portrayed in a negative light, which will ultimately mean that this is just like a little push for American exceptionalism and informational signs within the Park Service.
Wow. So basically, you're eliminating a part of history that we don't, quote unquote, want to see anymore.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is the job of the National Park Service is to interpret history, and American history is not pretty. It often is very painful, and we've made a lot of mistakes, but if you want to wrap that up and say that, well, you're just portraying American history in a negative light, well, then American history shouldn't be negative.
100%. And also, who's to say if it's negative or not? So if you were to tell like a Native American that their history isn't negatively portrayed when you're talking about the removal of like sanctuaries or the removal of like their reservations, but the white man views that as good, like who do you take? Whose side are you on? Like, we're all Americans. So I don't understand how that's even possible if something's not portrayed in a way that makes America look good, because America's made up of so many different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's the thing about history is, history looks real great from certain viewpoints, and it does not from everyone else.
Yeah.
And just people that, it's not just like, National Park Service sites are not just like big swaths of wilderness, like in Alaska. They're also historical sites. Mm-hmm. And some of those sites are going to be heavily impacted by that kind of signage mandate. Like, for example, Stonewall in, New York. They removed the T from the LGBT, despite that monument, being dedication to trans women.
Yeah, it just seems like a misinformation in an era that we are searching for concrete information and reliable resources.
Yeah. So I think people need to pay attention and just have public outcry for that, because this is being, changed very quietly and very under the radar.
Right. So with those changes that are being made, like the signage that's being taken down and replaced with different signage, I'm not very educated about all of the specific history to any given region. So how would I know, or how can I know that the history that I'm reading is really the history that happened versus upgraded signage?
Well, if it is a government website, for the most part, as of now, it is like mandated for the government to keep an archive of all pages past and present. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see when the page was last updated. And there are archives that you can access to see previous versions of that page.
Okay, that's genius. See, I didn't know that. And that's why these types of conversations are super important. So that way you can understand and be a voice to people that don't know these things of here's what to look out for. If you aren't sure that this is what is actually what happened, go back and look at the archives while they're still there at least. But yeah, that's a really, really good call out.
Yeah, part of my job when I was a meeting rangers, I also used to write some of those web pages for the National Park Service.
Wow.
So when those mandates were made to, remove any negative history about the pages, and that signage has to be changed, that is typically mandated from the top. Mm-hmm. And that's just another way that, this administration can demoralize the people that are working. And, the rangers that are there telling that history, are providing interpretation. They're interpretation rangers because they love talking about it. They love, they're history nerds.
Yeah.
And so if you tell somebody to kind of rewrite history to an American exceptionalism kind of perspective, that's just another way to, demoralize the people that are working there.
Yeah. And with this American exceptionalism, is there anything else in regards to the parks, the Forest Service, BLM that also is being affected aside from the bill and aside from the updating of signage? Obviously, there is some sort of limitations that you in any government, not you specifically, but government officials have in terms of being able to share their side or their input about the political standing, which seems like it shouldn't be something that's so political, but unfortunately is.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason why government employees are not allowed to have any kind of political stance is something called the Hatch Act.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are on duty, wearing your uniform, somebody asks you how you feel about, XYZ thing that like the Trump administration did or the Biden administration did, you're supposed to remain politically neutral. It's one thing if you are off duty and you're not wearing your uniform, then you could say whatever you want because you're a private citizen at the time. I mean, the Hatch Act kind of mandates even extend so far as like your own personal social media. And sometimes if you find like government employees, they'll often say like at the top, there'll be a disclaimer in their bio or something that will say, these views are 100% my own and not representative of like the United States government or something, just because, if you give a political statement like in your ranger uniform, people will often think you are speaking on behalf of the National Park Service. So that kind of like the Hatch Act exists to just like prevent the Park Service or just any federal government agency from being conflated with another like a political opinion, which depending on the political opinion like that can be super super harmful.
Definitely, especially when it comes into regards of the cutting. Like if you're working in the national park and someone asks you, how do you feel about all these cuts that have been made to your sector? What do you say? Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you. Get more time to work.
You inherently can't talk about it without it being political.
Right. Which is such a wild concept as well of what things have become political, which seem that they don't belong in the realm of politics, which national parks to me and National Forest Service and BLM seems so apolitical, but has become so political that it begs the conversation of, well, where do I draw the line? Where is that boundary in the sand? And when do I have my ability to have my own voice versus when I have the voice of the government?
And I mean, that line changes all the time. And unfortunately, it's extended so far as if you try to tell what actually happened in history, that's considered a political statement.
Wow. Okay, so there's these updates that are occurring in terms of signage. You're going and archiving old documents on websites and things, or not you specifically, but just in the broader spectrum of the National Park Service. They are going through and updating these websites and these resources of information and archiving the old ones. So is there anything else that you think that people should pay close attention to in terms of just being aware of what's happening with their own land?
Yeah, I mean, be aware of your own land. When you go and recreate, just like talk to the rangers that are there. If there are rangers there, you might go to like a really remote area, but talk to the rangers there. Be really vigilant on your safety. If you get hurt in an understaffed area, there might not be someone coming to get you, or it might be a long time until they're able to get you. But also, calling your representatives is not the only action that you can take to fight these things. The power of protest is very powerful. There have been quite a few protests in regards to public lands specifically. There have just been protests that are, against what this administration is doing if you want to participate.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like there's so many options for you to take part in, and it really is just up to your own discretion as to whether or not you choose to take part in protesting or take part in doing your part of just cleaning up the parks if you have the ability to volunteer and the luxury of time of volunteering. It really is just up to what you are able to do to me feels like you kind of have to take part in everything in order to feel like you're doing something, when that's not necessarily the case. You can write letters, you can make phone calls. It doesn't need to be the full gamut of things. So any little thing that you can do to help seems like it will.
Yeah, letter writing is a big one too. But, you also just can't be in a place where you're trying to do something all of the time, because that gets so exhausting. Call your senators, write letters, participate in protests if you feel comfortable and there's one near you. But also just, when you go out into public land, just like be a good steward, leave no trace, take care of other people. There's so many, even like you said, little things that you can do that will make a difference.
Right. And with the discussion of all things going on, a lot of this information has come to me specifically via social media, because that's where I consume a good portion of my news. How do you feel like social media is impacting these social movements in these political movements, in terms of having people join your side and having people feel like they know where to go or what to do? Do you feel like it's a positive impact?
I think it is a positive impact. There's definitely, a couple of different sides to this, right? Social media is a very powerful tool. It has the power to amplify information very, very quickly. Prior to social media, you didn't really get too many, photos and videos on the ground unless there were journalists involved. But now anybody can whip out their phone, and if they see an injustice, they can capture it. And it also allows you to spread information very quickly, and especially to like your close contacts, and just like widen that circle. The other thing about that, though, is misinformation can also be spread very quickly. So you have to take what you see on social media with a grain of salt and make sure that you're verifying the sources that you're getting this information from.
Yes. So when you're verifying your sources and considering your sources, to bring back the name of the podcast, but what are some reputable sources? Obviously, the National Park Service is reputable when they're talking about the national parks, and the National Forest Service is reputable when you're talking about national forestry. But where do you think that you can find reputable information in regards to what the bill is even about? Because like I said, when I went to go look on the whitehouse.com, which one would think is a pretty reputable source, they talk about all of the positive impacts and what good will come and how they're cutting tax dollars and how this will be effective and efficient for everybody. But if you're not seeing the negative side, if you're not seeing the opposite side, where are you going for that information? Where can you find information that you trust?
If you want to go with like first person sources, I personally wouldn't go to like the summary of the bill on whitehouse.gov, but I will open the bill and read it for myself. And maybe it takes like a lot more comprehension, and it's like something like 97 pages, but that language is there and it's telling you what it is. But if you want like a more summarized thing, and you already know that, public lands are for sale, or this thing is happening that you don't like, I would look at nonprofits, conservation organizations, places like the ACLU that are already fighting back against these actions that are going to happen in this bill. And they usually will have a place that summarizes the effects of what's going to happen in the bill, and then actionable items that you can do to help fight back.
And would you say that that's a pretty neutral source that doesn't really sway to one side or the other in terms of political leaning?
I guess it depends. It depends on the issue for sure. If you take something that typically has bipartisan support, like public lands belonging in public hands, and you go somewhere like the Outdoor Alliance, this is typically going to be something, that is in the best interest for that bipartisan support. But if you are somebody that has a different issue in mind, that typically usually leans like one way or the other.
Yeah. So ultimately it's digesting information based on what you associate with. So as an outdoors person that typically is pro public land, that is typically pro public parks and public recreation, you would be able to digest that information and be like, okay, so this is what it's saying, and this is how other people that I typically agree with are viewing this.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So one more thing that I want to ask you is, what is information that you have that you think everybody should know, or information that you are aware of that you think is underrepresented?
Like, in regards to what?
In regards to public spaces, in regards to the outdoors and public lands, that realm.
I mean, like, I'm kind of in the unique position where I've been a park ranger, and so I know the ins and outs of working for the National Park Service and just the lived experience of, like, being someone who loves public land and recreating on public land. But I think when it comes to... Sorry, I'm, like, getting distracted by the echo.
No, you're fine. Sorry. Let me turn down the volume on this. Let's see if that helps. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
so let me ask let me see if I can turn it down even more to see if it... Okay, is that better?
Hold on. Yeah, it's a little better.
Okay, let me see if I can edit this, because there's an option on the side over here that has echo, but my screen is taking a minute to load. Maybe because I need to... Let's see. Yeah, let me do this. Okay. Is that better? I feel like
yes,
I can still hear it on your end.
Okay. Oh, no.
No.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me plug in my computer. It seems like it's not actually plugged in. Give me a second here. Let me try a different outlet. This is an unrelated cause, but before I just randomly close out. All right. Okay. I'm sure that probably did not help the echo at all, but at least I'm plugged in so I won't die on you. Okay, so going back to the question that I had asked was, you are an advocate for public land and you obviously have this amazing experience of being in the National Park Service. What is something that you just take for granted in terms of your knowledge that you feel like the general public might not know a lot about?
I think just like how close everyone is, to public land and things that, just how close everyone is to public land. I grew up in Texas and like I didn't grow up actually going outside very much. And so when I thought of like recreating on public land, I thought, oh, I have to like drive, 12 hours and go to, some national park like really far away. But then I worked for the national park. I worked in one of those national parks that people have to drive very far away to get to. And then they were like, oh yeah, here's our map of like all the, public land near us. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can just drive in like, 30 minutes in any direction or like 45 minutes in any direction. And there's some national historic site or national recreation area or national seashore or national forest, something like that is there. You don't have to go far away to enjoy it, and it already belongs to you.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like that, again, is something that I had so little knowledge of when I was living on the East Coast, of that, well, the only time that I can really be outdoors or do things like go hiking or go kayaking is if I were to go out west, when that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, the national forest and the public land is a little bit more limited in those areas, but it's still accessible. You still have it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really beautiful public land that's in the East Coast too. Like when I was like looking at jobs to apply for, the next park to go to, I was so surprised by how many just like NPS sites there are on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. There's one for everyone, even if you like are not the national park type, but you're like a real history nerd. Guess what? Like there's probably a national park for you there.
Yeah. And the part about history is so interesting to me as well, because I didn't realize that the National Park Service also wrapped into the history portion. I figured that it was just two separate entities, but now that you bring it up, it makes sense that it's just one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the mission of the National Park Service is to like preserve unimpaired the besides natural beauty, cultural and historical sites that are important to the U.S. That is like Stonewall National Monument in New York, like that's in the middle of New York City. Yeah. That is National Park Service sites. There are park rangers that go to work there in the little flat hat in the middle of New York City. They're there.
That's awesome. See, that's one of the other things that I didn't know is what the difference between a national park versus a national monument is. Because when I was doing my road trip from Boston to San Diego, I stopped in St. Louis. And I had thought for a long time that the arch in St. Louis was
Yeah,
my question was, how does the park services decide whether something's going to be a national park or a national monument?
honestly, I'm not 100% of the answer. I
Okay.
mean, typically when you think of like a national park, they're huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then a national monument are usually a lot smaller. Typically, like, there have been legislation introduced to like designate a national park or a site as like a national park, for example. And like Yellowstone was the first one, and that took like a whole bill to introduce that as a national park.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not 100% on the answer, but like national parks are usually like the big sites, national monuments are smaller.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that's like a national seashore or, some kind of national historic site. So I think it just all depends on the resource that they, want to protect. And then that just like designates what it's.
Okay. So, say to go back to the bill that we were talking about earlier, which I hate that it's called the Big Beautiful Bill. Like, I don't want to call it that because it's not that. So I'm like refusing to call it that. But that bill, the one that we were talking about earlier. So say that that one does or doesn't get it passed. Do you think that that's going to impact National Forest Service and that more people are going to try and get more land registered as a national park? Or do you think more people are going to try and keep it privatized so that way, or not privatized, keep it public so that way there's still all of that accessibility?
I think that that's super interesting. Like nonprofits and organizations that are actually trying to do that. A lot of there's one that I really like called Save the Redwoods League,
Okay.
and they are actually one of the few like nonprofits, or maybe the only one that I know of, that actively tries to do land back, where their whole mission is they buy private land and then transfer that into the hands of their indigenous partners,
Oh, okay.
who then open it up or manage it as the tribe sees fit. But it's usually opened up for public, but co-managed by indigenous partners and Save the Redwoods League.
Hmm.
So there are, organizations already doing that, which
Hmm.
I think is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I think if this big, really shitty bill passes and that land is gone, like, we don't know what's going to happen to it.
Right.
And I think it could be interesting. I guess it just depends on, like the politics of the state. You could see the state take that forward and take it upon themselves to conserve land, like, conserve land. Like
Hmm.
California has a 30 by 30, by 2030, they aim to have 30% of all land in California, under, public land and is conserved. So you could see it potentially at the state level, but like it shouldn't be left up to the decision of the states and nonprofit organizations. I think, that land shouldn't change hands, or, public land shouldn't be, at risk depending on, which state line you cross into.
Right.
So I think that's why it's really important that we stop that bill in its tracks now.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like stopping the bill and ultimately trying to do the best that we can as just normal civilians of calling our senator and doing our part in that realm and in that mix. In addition to that, of just trying to figure out, okay, what is BLM or how do I give back and how do I recognize the space and how do I promote other people to care? Because there are people that are like, why do I care if public land is sold? Like, I don't use it. Like, how do you combat that as an issue? Because it's clear that they're not speaking out of empathy.
I mean, I think like there's a couple of ways you could do it. A big thing is just like, connecting people emotionally to number one, what is public land? Why should it matter to all of you? Even if you never access public land or you never go camping in your life, you're like, that is not something that I ever want to do. Public land belonging in public hands is going to affect you, because like if that land is conserved, that means, that land is protected ultimately from things that degrade the environment, mining, logging, all kinds of things. And that's going to impact you just like in your everyday life.
Hmm.
If you, live somewhere in a city and you're like, why do I care if this like rural forest, like in the middle of nowhere, like gets chopped down? that forest is cleaning the air. It's providing, ecosystem for maybe important animals that you care about or plant life that you care about. Scientists do research in these large swaths of land all of the time, and are, finding new things all of the time. Like, this keeps your air clean, it keeps your water clean, like, it affects you every day.
Yeah. And that's a really good point to bring up that this is a regulation that allows for you to live better in your own environment. Even though it's an ecosystem that might not necessarily directly impact you, it is. It is somewhere that they're doing testing on soil or they're doing testing on water and they're seeing how that relates to where you live. And they're doing that to see if there's anything that they can do to improve your area. And if they're not able to have a baseline to test off of, what are we going to have to as a baseline, as a control group? We're not.
And like, I have an ecology background. Like, I love talking about how like ecosystems are intertwined and ecosystems don't know boundaries. And so maybe, Stanislaus National Forest is going to get logged or something. Those streams that start in that forest will go, to the ocean, or forest somewhere way on the other side of California is logged down. The river that runs through it will connect to the ocean, impacting, maybe you care about salmon and that's something that you
Right.
eat. If that land is sold and that critical ecosystem is gone, it's going to affect, the salmon further down the stream, which means you're not going to get any on your dinner plate.
Right.
So it is all interconnected.
Yeah, and I love that ecosystem knows no boundaries. There was recently this video that I saw that it was a bowl of soup, and the guy that was presenting the soup was saying that the soup was earth, and he put a drop of poison into the soup. And he said, I only put it on this side, but would you eat from this side? And the person he was asking said, no, the soup is full of poison. And he said, that's exactly how the earth is. You can't affect one area without it impacting directly another. Like when you put poison in one place, you get poison everywhere. That's how the world works.
Yeah. I use the salmon like analogy just because like I spent a lot
No,
of
I
time
love
in
that.
Alaska where salmon is really important, and some of the land that is potentially up for sale in this bill is in the Arctic Circle, and potentially mining projects in even like Southwest Alaska,
Mhm.
which will impact places like Bristol Bay, which is currently home to like the last healthy salmon run left on Earth.
Wow.
So even if Bristol Bay is okay and fine, if there are mining projects because that public land, 200 miles north is sold, it's going to affect, that big waterway.
Yeah. There's definitely direct impact with this legislation. Hopefully, it is not passed, and hopefully, we don't see the effects of it. Hopefully, the people that hunt and fish and use that land don't see the effects of it. And ultimately, what I am looking to put out with this podcast is just some positive affirmation that there is hope for community and there is hope for what we're looking for. You see that with the number of people that are posting videos in solidarity of like don't sell our land and the number of people that are posting the impacts. I don't think I've seen a single video that's like, yeah, let's sell it. Let's get rid of it. So there's at least that.
Yeah, it's very hopeful. I think it's really really important to have hope. It seems really scary. It seems like there's almost nothing we can do about it, but that is further from the truth. This, amendment to this bill got removed the first time around, so that means it can get removed second time around.
Hmm.
And you just have to keep fighting. You have to keep, yelling about it, being really annoying on social media and posting a ton of videos and commenting annoying things and like calling your senator, especially like Mike Lee, we hate you, send a ton of like hate mail to the government.
Yeah, we
If
need
people
this to
show like
not
a
pass.
strong reaction, yes, like if people share a strong reaction against something happening, it looks really really bad to politicians if they want to do it anyway. And midterms are coming up, so you also need to remind these people that we can vote you out if you do stuff that we don't like.
Yeah. And that's really important that you called that out because I feel like in this time that we're currently in, there's seemingly something that's always breaking the news. There's seemingly a new thing that has just happened that is impacting seemingly everyone in our country. And it's difficult to feel like, what's the impact that we can make? And how does government learn if we don't have a say? And the fact that you're bringing up midterms and the fact that you're bringing to light our ability to vote, and that voting is super important, that the person that you elected into the Senate has the ability to bill. And so if you vote them out, you could have the ability to vote somebody in that could help create a new bill or help pass a new bill that would reverse this current bill. So that is really, really, really important. And I think that I really appreciate you bringing that up because that's not something that most people would think of offhand.
Yeah, I've noticed it, especially with this round of elections, that increasingly young people are getting more and more fed up with just politicians that they have probably been in office since before they were born,
Right.
continuing to make these decisions that are affecting us so negatively and doing completely the opposite of what their constituents want. Like, these career politicians just continue to get elected, time and time again because they have the power to, continue to run political campaigns. And it's just really important that if you are feeling fed up, you show up and vote those people out. And you know what? You also maybe consider running for your local elections even. If you want the old guard out, you have to be part of the movement that does something about it.
Right. Yeah. And that's a really powerful statement of feeling like you can be the change or feeling like you haven't seen the change that you want to see. Why not create it? Why not empower it? I love that.
Definitely.
So, are there any other things that you want to share in regards to public land, what people should and could be doing right now that could be impactful or things that they should keep on the forefront so that way they know what to look out for in the future?
Well, first off, don't give up. Have hope. It's really easy to doom scroll, especially just with the barrage of things that are happening every day. But that's the strategy, is to make you feel powerless and to make you feel like nothing you do matters. But that is the exact opposite. I'm being really annoying and calling my senators right now. I have Alex Padilla's office. He's my senator in California on speed dial. And his office sends me emails all the time where they're like, we know you love public land. We got
Okay, well, good because I have them set up to be sent every single day. Thank you.
Yes, I have them. I have them more. It's an auto draft. Just keep signing those petitions, sending those emails. If you feel comfortable going out to protests, show up and use your right to protest. Be vocal on social media. And this also doesn't mean don't go outside and recreate on public land. I think it's really important that you go and just enjoy your public land. And it can be really rejuvenating to go out and see what you're fighting for with this care, with what's happening. But if you do go out, just make sure that you're a good steward, leave no trace, take care of other people, and just make sure that, you have your safety in mind. I go out and I make sure I have a really good first aid kit, and, it might help to get, a wilderness first aid class just in case. But, go out and participate in those actions, but also go out and do what rejuvenates that fighting spirit in you and enjoy your public land.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Felicia, so much for coming on. I've really appreciated all of your input and your advice on what to do and how to be impactful and how to remain hopeful, most importantly. Is there anything else that you think that would be important to touch on or that you want to make sure is included in the episode?
I think I'm good. I mean, if y'all want to follow me on TikTok, I'm
Yeah.
at ube_softserve on TikTok. I made that username decision a long time ago and it kind of just stuck. And now I can't change it. So that's what I am.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to tag it in the show notes as well so that way people can easily access it. But it was so awesome to hear from you. I loved your content on TikTok and you're really just an upbeat, inspiring person that makes me want to be a better advocate for our public land as well.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me yap. I know it's going to be a long edit, but I appreciate
No,
it.
not at all. I love so much of what you're saying. If anything that I have to edit out, it's on my own accord of my own technical difficulties with the echoing and all of that fun stuff. So definitely nothing to worry about on your part at all.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your week.
You too.